Hi everyone, welcome to our Bible study today, 2 Chronicles chapter 15. We are going to talk about Asa and some of his reforms that he did in Judah, so we've got a godly king to talk about today. Asa reigned for 41 years in Judah, the southern kingdom. That reign fits within the window from about 960 to 910 BC. As far as our key characters, well, we've got Asa, the king of Judah. We've got Azariah. Azariah was a prophet of God who God used to deliver a message to Asa. We'll talk about that in our first section of the outline. And then we have Maacah. Maacah was the queen mother of Judah. She lost her role, though, because she was an idol worshiper, and Asa wasn't going to tolerate that. Now, quickly over to our map. The kings of Judah reigned from Jerusalem, and that's where Asa reigned from. We're also going to talk about the high places. Now, if you were with us for some of our previous studies, you'll be familiar with these because we've introduced them already. But if you're new, the high places are mentioned here. These were unauthorized places of worship where sacrifices were offered, seemingly sometimes to the true God of heaven, but also other times to pagan gods, foreign gods, idols, false gods. The text doesn't tell us how these places were originally designated, but it seems like the people of Israel and Judah may have adopted some of these from the Canaanites who lived in the land before they did. Generally speaking, the high places were not good things. They were places that were not sanctioned by God where worship and sacrifices were being offered. And the text almost always indicates that these are something that should have been gotten rid of, and true worship was supposed to happen in Jerusalem at the temple. It's probably likely that they were called the high places both because they were elevated on a sacred level, but they were probably also on the tops of hills many times. Okay, so that takes us over to page number 2 in our outline. The first section, verses 1 through 7. Azariah, the prophet of God, delivers a message to King Asa. So God gave a message to his man Azariah, and Azariah went and delivered that message to the king. It was basically a reminder of the covenant that God had made with his people, that if they were faithful to him, he would bless them. If they forsook him, he would forsake them and give them over to oppression and to their enemies. Azariah reminded Asa of times in the people's past when they had forsaken God, when they had rebelled against him. But he also reminded them how every time that they were willing to repent, God was gracious and he was willing to forgive them. So God's prophet encouraged the king to take courage and to take action against all forms of ungodliness in Judah. Now, evidently, Asa took this to heart because we'll see in the next section that that's exactly what he does. Asa's reforms in Judah are the topic of verse 8 through verse 19. As soon as Asa heard the words of Azariah, he began to purge all the idols from his kingdom. He also repaired the true places of worship. He repaired the bronze altar that sat out in front of the temple, the altar of burnt offering. This tells us something of the condition of what people thought of God. Like they just had let the temple go, to pieces, and it has to be repaired here. Asa even went so far as to take these reforms into his immediate family. Maacah, who was the queen mother, she was removed from her position because she was an idol worshiper. She had this idol known as an Asherah. This false god is known as an Asherah. He took down the Asherah idol, crushed it, and burned it. Then in his 15th year as king, Asa gathered all the people of his kingdom together, and together they offered 700 oxen to the Lord and 7,000 sheep, and they took an oath that they were going to follow the Lord and keep his commands with all their heart and soul. Anyone who outright refused to follow the Lord was to be put to death. One of the things that the text says that Asa failed to do was to remove those high places from Judah. But the text still says that, quote, his heart was blameless all of his days. So there were some things that he neglected to do that he should have done, but overall he was a pretty good guy. Asa refilled the temple treasuries that had been emptied out previously with gold and silver that was dedicated to the Lord. And after his campaign against idolatry, Asa enjoyed a period of peace. God blessed the kingdom with peace, just as he promised that he would, until the 35th year of the king. So that is 2 Chronicles chapter 15. Now let's go down to our application. Obviously, Asa's leadership is admirable, but I think it's especially admirable in the fact that he was determined to root out evil, even so far as going into his own immediate family to do it. Many corrupt leaders, or lesser leaders, stop short of doing anything that might affect their families. They're okay with condemning other people's sins, but they don't want to expose the problems of their own relatives or call those things out. And this is an important lesson for leaders to learn and an important example for them to follow, because this happens even in leadership in the church. Church leaders will sometimes rebuke a certain group of people for participating in a particular sin, while at the same time turning a blind eye to the sins that maybe their relatives are engaged in. So Asa gives all modern leaders a good example to follow. He cared more about the purity of his people and following God's laws than protecting his relatives from shame. Thanks for joining me for 2 Chronicles 15. Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow and we'll talk about chapter 16.